This episode is brought to you by Bleacher Report. How do you follow sports? From college football to the NBA, Bleacher Report brings you the latest news, live scores, and epic highlights from your favorite leagues, teams, and athletes, all in one app. Dive into exclusive shows hosted by your favorite athletes and original Bleacher Report series with breaking news, rumors, and predictions all season long. Download Bleacher Report to personalize your coverage.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Hey, it's Austin James. Yes, I'm living with diabetes, but it doesn't have to define me. Thanks to the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor, I get real-time glucose readings throughout the day. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor is small and easy to wear, giving me the freedom to focus on my life as a parent and a musician. Now this is progress. You can get a free sensor at freestylelibre.us.
Offer available for people who qualify. Visit myfreestyle.us to see all terms and conditions. Certain exclusions apply. Data on file. Abbott Diabetes Care. For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
This year, Santa's bringing the power of Energizer into his workshop.
Whoa, the Energizer Bunny's got so much power.
Wait, he's powered up all the toys. I think that means we're done for the year.
I love this bunny.
He's the hardest working helper the North Pole has ever seen. And he wants all your gifts to have the power of the #1 longest lasting AA battery. So this holiday season, stock up on Santa's and the elves' favorite battery, Energizer Ultimate Lithium.
Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 78 of DBR Bites, the Duke Basketball Roundup. It is Sunday, December 29th, 2024. This will likely be the final episode of the 2024 calendar year. Although this is going to be a nice preview episode, we get to preview both football and basketball. Before we get into all that, I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. Jason Evans is also with me. How are you enjoying your holiday break, Jason?
Yeah, it's going just fine. A little bit quiet. Both my sons are not in town. They're with girlfriends in other locales.
Good for them.
And yeah, no, they're having a great time. I'm sure everything's great. But it's a little quiet around the Evans household.
Well, hopefully Cameron is keeping you company on these cold days in Atlanta. But Jason, let's preview first the basketball, which is what we're here for. The Virginia Tech Hokies come to town. It is a New Year's Eve matchup. Not at night. There's some college football to be played at night, but at least at 4:30 in the afternoon on ACC Network, if you are not in Cameron, you will be able to watch this game. I will not be watching this game on ACC Network because I will be at Cameron. I'm going with my best friends and my godson. If you bump into me in the friendly halls, do please say hello. I don't think I'm going to have time to meet up or anything, but it will be a nice game to get down and celebrate the new year, the end of the new year down in Cameron, Jason. I think there's very few places we would rather be on any date of the year than in Cameron Indoor Stadium.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, that is, it'll be a fun time for you. And I don't know, they're going to have fireworks. They're going to drop a giant ball or something like that. What are they going to do for New Year's Eve?
I would like Duke to drop the big ball into the net. That's what I would like to do many times. We could talk about that. But Jason, first, let's talk about the Virginia Tech Hokies not doing well this year. 153rd in KenPom, 208th in the net. So if you're doing the math, ladies and gentlemen, that is a quad 4 game that we are about to experience right now. But as we talked about in the last episode, this is a game that we have to win if we want to start thinking about seeding in the NCAA tournament and beyond. They are 5-7 on the year, 0-1 in the ACC. They actually started out okay. They won their first 3 games of the season to Delaware State, USC Upstate, and Winthrop. They then lost 6 straight, and I think that's where it was. Any decent team that they've played this year, Penn State, Michigan, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Pitt, they lost all of those games. They then won 2 after that, again, to NC A&T and to Navy, and then lost on December 21st. That was their last game that they played. They lost to St. Joe's by 20. The Winthrop game is the only win they have against a team ranked higher than 300 in KenPom. And Winthrop is not hot.
Wait. You
Yeah,
need to make sure everyone really hears what you just said.
I,
Give it
I,
to
I
them
we're
again,
getting
man.
there. We're getting there. Literally, Winthrop is 189th. That is the best team that they have beaten, and the only team that is not ranked 300 or lower.
Wow.
As I mentioned, any decent team that they've played so far this year, they have lost. And if you remember last year, we went to Castle Coliseum in Blacksburg, a tough place to play, and we ended up beating them by 10, which was at the time one of the better wins of the year for Duke. And this is a game that this is a much different team. I know, Jason, you'll talk a little bit later about some of the players, one of whom we are very familiar with. But there is no doubt that this team has regressed from that team that we saw in Castle last year. And it starts, Jason, with the offense and defense. I shifted to you by saying, am I going to need to take a nap before or during this game? Because they have one of the slowest tempos in college basketball, and that has really affected the efficiency that they have on offense.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that tempo, they're 331st in tempo in the land. Really, really slow, and it's because they're super slow on offense. They have trouble finding shots they like, and then they have trouble making those shots. Now, this Duke basketball team is also super slow on defense because teams cannot find shots they like against Duke. I think it's going to be a real struggle for Duke to get to even like 75 points in this game because I think you're going to see Virginia Tech like challenged to have a shot clock violation on like half their possessions. It's going to be crazy because you got a super slow offense and a super slow defense matched up against each other in this game. I just think that the pace of this game is going to be exceedingly slow. You know, you mentioned they're 153rd in Ken Palm, second worst team in the ACC. Here's a list of teams, a short list of the teams that are better than Virginia Tech in Ken Palm's ratings. Cal, Purdue, UNC. Wait, sorry, I did that wrong. Cal Baptist, Purdue Fort Wayne, UNC Greensboro. That's what I meant to say. Here's a list of the power conference teams. Every power conference team, I'm including the Big East, top 5 biggest conferences. Here's every power conference team that is worse than Virginia Tech. Ready for it? Boston College.
That's the list.
The list, baby.
That's the list.
Yeah. So Virginia Tech has been terrible on this season. You mentioned they've lost to all the good teams they played. Most of those games they lost badly. The only game that was even competitive that was the game against Pitt, and that was the game where Pitt was shaken by the loss of Damian Dunn, and it hung with them for a few games in a row. They've seemed to right things, a little bit since then, but the Pitt game is really the only even competitive game among the games that they've lost to good teams. This Virginia Tech club is equally bad on offense and defense. They're ranked 181st on offense, 144th on defense. Seeing as their defense is slightly better than the offense, let's start there. The only thing they do really well on defense is a category called non-steal turnovers. We're talking about things like walks, offensive fouls, backcourt violations, tossing the ball out of bounds. These are non-steal turnovers, and they're essentially turnovers that the other team makes that you don't necessarily cause for the most part. And Virginia Tech is 13th in the nation in non-steal turnovers. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that non-steal turnovers is at least a little bit of a random. It's not as much as free throws. Free throws is a random stat. We talk about that all the time. Free throw defense. Yeah. Right. That's what I mean, of course. Free throw defense, very random. Non-steal turnovers, it's not quite as random as that, but it's a kind of, it's sort of, when your opponent makes a mistake, it's not something that you positively impact all that much. I guess if you draw a charge, I guess you force them into a travel. Yeah, a little bit.
You can, right? You can force, as we talk about, Duke forcing teams to make bad decisions. That's part of that, right? Like making, having suffocating defense. They're trying to find someone and they throw the ball 15 rows into the stands. Like it all falls under that. It's not it's not where we're taking the ball from them. They're a team that's going to try and force you to do something stupid in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's not completely random, but it's at least has a little randomness to it. And again, that is the only thing on defense that they do that they're very good at. Without that, they would be truly abysmal on defense. They're one of the bottom like 70 teams in the country at 2-point field goal defense. Their opponents hit like 55.5% of their shots, which is a high percentage to be hitting from two. They don't block shots. They don't get steals. Virginia Tech, they're they're okay at protecting the 3-point line. Teams only hit about 31.5% from three, which is a good number. So Virginia Tech does a decent job out there. But it's worth noting, sort of a weird quirk of that is that their opponents shoot a ton of 3-pointers. More than 46% of the shots taken against Virginia Tech come from 3-point range. That's what, like, one of the 30 highest 3-point rates in the country. So there's this weird dichotomy of Virginia Tech not allowing guys to hit a lot of 3-pointers, 31% defense, but also allowing teams to shoot a lot of threes. So that's going to be something really interesting to look at. Duke is a team that likes to shoot the three. I think you'll see you're going to see well over 23-point attempts from Duke in this game, perhaps, coming close to 30. And the question is going to be, is Virginia Tech going to be successful at holding us, down around 30, 31%, or is Duke at the 35, 38, 40%, in which case this game probably will be a laugher. Let's get to their offense really quick. There's something funny. There's something weird that jumps out at you about the Virginia Tech offense when you look at the advanced stat. Don, remember those non-steal turnovers that I talked about that are kind of this weird, fluky kind of stat? And how they're great at it on defense? They're terrible at it on offense. Yep. It's like it's so weird and fluky. Their games apparently feature an incredible number of boneheaded plays on both ends of the floor with teams just throwing balls away. It's just this weird thing that jumped out at you. By the way, it's worth noting, Duke is one of the best teams in the country at non-steal turnovers. We're 15th in the land. We don't walk with the ball. We don't throw it away. So I don't know what to tell you, Virginia Tech. They're a team that makes a lot of strange turnovers. Duke is a team that does not make a lot of strange turnovers, and that's one of the things Virginia Tech counts on. It's just going to be a weird, fluky kind of game. On the other stuff about them on offense is they're, in addition to being bad at non-steal turnovers, they're bad at steals. They're bad at everything about turnovers. They're 341st in the country at turnover percentage. More than 1 out of every 5 Virginia Tech possessions ends in a turnover. That is bad. That is really bad. They're okay from the perimeter shooting 3-pointers. They hit 34%. They're not very good at hitting 2-pointers. The one thing they do well on offense is they grab offensive rebounds. About 35% of their missed shots they end up grabbing. So they're a good offensive rebounding team. All right, let's get to the players, Don. Or do you have anything before I get to the players?
Yeah, real quick, Jason. You were mentioning the fact that they force teams to take a lot of 3-pointers, and they're pretty decent at holding them to a low percentage. I noticed also that for 2-pointers, they're again one of the bottom 100 teams in the country. They allow 56% 2-point shots from the floor. So I'm wondering if the idea here is to get the ball inside to where big men. Of course, we are taller than them by every stretch, as you're about to probably talk about. But I wonder if that's the part of the game plan is maybe, you said 33s would be something that we could expect, and we've seen that in a few games. I wonder if the idea is maybe shoot closer to 20 and get the ball inside a little bit more and have guys like Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple get inside where they can be effective.
It's possible. I'll tell you the other thing is Duke has been using Common Malawach in that lob game, in that
pick and roll.
Yeah. They've been using him a lot more lately. Con Knipple especially. I practically spent an entire podcast talking about that. I think that could be something that you see Duke try to go to more and more. By the way, did you notice? Have you seen what Man is shooting from the field on the season? His 2-point
Not yet.
Oh, it's outrageous. He's hitting 82.2% of his shots.
That's pretty good.
That's a big number. 82% of his 2-point field goals. Wow. Yeah. So I think you may see Duke trying to use him a good bit. All right. So like I said, let's get to the players really quick. Not their best player, but I'm going to start with Jaden Schutt. Transfer from the Blue Devils. We got to start with him. And he's actually arguably having the best season of anybody on the Virginia Tech team. He does what they need him to do, which is shoot 3-pointers. He's shooting almost 37%, 36.8% from 3-point range. He's taken 76 threes on the season, averaging almost 9.5 points per game. He leads them in minutes played. He went there to get an opportunity that he was not getting at Duke, and he's getting almost 29 minutes per game on a deep Virginia Tech team that plays a lot of different guys. He is the guy that plays the most for them, Jaden Shoot. By the way, interesting little note about him. I mentioned he's taken 76 threes on the season. He's only taken 22-point shots, only 15 free throws. He's just camping out at that line and hoping that someone gets him the ball and he can fire up from three. Getting a few rebounds, a couple assists. He's actually second on the team in assists. I just love I love that Jaden Shoot, has gotten a chance there and is doing fairly nicely for Virginia Tech. They're not a team with a dominant player. They've got 6 guys who average between like 7 and 11 points per game. Their leading scorer is Toby Lawal at 10.7 points per game. He's a junior. Came over from after playing a couple years at Virginia Commonwealth, a 6'8" forward. He's going to go in the lane and try to draw a contact on you. He's hitting like better than 65% of his 2-point shots, so he's really good at getting the shot he wants inside. He also draws fouls really well. One of the themes of this Virginia Tech team is their big men are very, very good at getting to the free throw line. I think it's pretty likely that Toby Lawal is going to match up with Cooper Flagg, and Cooper's got to stay out of foul trouble while guarding this guy. Toby Lawal, by the way, is also their leading rebounder, especially good on the offensive boards. I mentioned that's one of the places Virginia Tech does a decent job, and he's one of the major reasons why. The other guy who does a decent job on the offensive boards and who draws a lot of fouls is their center, Michael Poteet, fifth-year senior, averaging better than 10 points per game. I believe he's their only fifth-year senior. They are not a very experienced team. They're most of their lineup is like freshmen and sophomores, couple junior, but they're not. Most of the teams that Duke has played this year, it feels like you're seeing nothing but seniors and super seniors, and that is not the case with Virginia Tech, not at all.
Jason, real quick, I think his name is Malijal Poteet, and I realize why you said Michael.
Sorry.
No. I realize why you said Michael, because when I typed it in the first time, it auto-corrected to Michael. So I'm sure your computer did the same thing. I had to manually edit it in. But yeah, Malijal Poteet is his name.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry.
No, that is not a Jason error. That is literally an autocorrect error. Autocorrect was probably he didn't mean to do that. He's drunk. But
that's
yes,
so funny. So I apologize, Mr. Poteet, for getting your name wrong. I want to mention also about sort of the players on this Virginia Tech team, that they don't have a lot of guys other than Jaden Shoot who are good at shooting 3-pointers. We mentioned that they allow a lot of them, but they don't take a ton of them. And Jaden Shoot takes 6 or so 3-pointers per game. They got 2 other guys. Point guard Brandon Recksteiner takes about 5 3-pointers a game, but only hits 26% of them. Dude, if you want to shoot 5 a game and you're going to hit 26% of them, go ahead, shoot all you want. They got a wing, Jaden Young, also shoots about 5 threes per game. He hits them at about a 32% rate. But I mean, the reality is that this is a team that is probably not going to shoot you out of the gym. My big concern for Duke playing ACC games is, are we playing a team who has, an out-of-body experience and just shoots great from the perimeter? I think that's sort of the formula for what Duke would have to worry about against some of these ACC teams that frankly just aren't a very good matchup for the Blue Devils. And we haven't seen anything on the season that indicates to us that Virginia Tech is going to be that kind of club. I'll let you chime in, a little bit more on them. I've got some stuff on their coach, Mike Young, but I'll wait on that. What else you got on Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I was gonna say you mentioned Poteet and him being the experienced guy, the most experienced guy. He himself is a transfer, but he's the only transfer that didn't come in this year. They have 6 other transfers, including Shoot, that came in for this team this year, so they had to really rebuild their squad. One guy I don't think that you mentioned, but is also someone that has a connection to some Duke players, is Ben Hammond. He's their freshman. He played at PVI with Darren Harris and Patrick Gongba. So, of course, those guys know each other very well. He's a very short guard. He's 5'11". So again, the matchup there is going to be interesting. We've seen Marcus Barton from Notre Dame, who's a shorter guy who can get around taller trees. But I mean, Spencer Hubbard's not playing 40 minutes in this game. We would love for that to happen, but it's not going to happen. Other than him, everyone else is going to be looking down to try and find Ben Hammond when he's on the floor.
Yeah, all right. So let me get to Mike Young really quick, who's in his 6th year at Virginia Tech. And I have to wonder if he may be on the hot seat a little bit. I mean, first of all, obviously, this year has been abysmally bad, the worst year of his tenure, I believe. But other than 2022, which, as you may recall, was the year they went on that shocking run in the ACC tournament. They won 4 games in 4 days, capped it off by beating Duke to take the ACC title. Other than that year, they've never been in the top 50 in Ken Palm. And that year, by the way, is the only time they've won 20 games. They're pretty consistently on the wrong side of the bubble. And then this year, obviously, they're far, far, far from the bubble. Mike Young is signed through the 26-27 season, so he's got 2 more years at about $2.25 million per year. I feel like his time may really be running short. I mean, first of all, you don't like to get your coach on like the last year of their contract because recruiting becomes impossible at that point because everyone knows that, you're fairly likely to be gone. So I think they may have to make a decision about Mike Young either this offseason or maybe next offseason. It doesn't look good for him. And the other weird thing is I mentioned that this is a very young Virginia Tech team. You said they're playing a fair number of freshmen and sophomores. If it was the before times, you would say, oh, Mike Young is building for the future. He's trying to develop these guys. This year they'll struggle, but they'll be better next year and on down the line. That doesn't work anymore. We're in the era of absolute free agency. Every guy, you mentioned, Donald, they got like 6, 7, 8 guys in the portal, because they lost so many guys to the portal last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're Mike Young and you begin to develop these guys. That's just not a formula, I don't think, that works in the current world of college basketball, because if they look good, unless you have the NIL to keep them in place, they're going to move on to someplace else. So it's a weird situation, I think, for this Virginia Tech club, and I don't quite know what Mike Young is doing other than losing to bad teams.
Well, I know what would get him an extension, a win against us on New Year's Eve. So let's keep the seat hot for Mike Young.
Yeah, baby.
And make him into the new year with a little bit of sweat on his brow in that department. Jason, let's get to some of the matchups and some of the things to watch. And I started with this, and I wrote this down. Don't let their shooters get hot. And of course, I spelled shooters SCHUTTERS, because as you mentioned, Jaden shoots a lot of threes. He leads the team in 3-pointers attempted. He leads the team in 3-pointers made. That is what he's there to do, and he spends a lot of time on the floor doing that. Of course, he knows the friendly confines of Cameron Indoor Stadium. While he didn't, have the best career here, he had some moments, right? And they were all at home where he was able to light up the scoreboard. And I think that this is the opportunity. Of course, he's going to have a little bit of extra pressure coming home and a little bit of extra motivation to come back to Cameron and show, hey, you let me go and you shouldn't have. So I think he's going to be a guy to watch, because you have to think that he's going to come in trying to, establish himself early as the guy on the Hokie squad.
Well, and the interesting thing about him is because of the turnover at Duke, like, he only really knows 2 of the guys on this team.
Two of the main guy, yeah, to the main knows, rotation, yeah,
right. He knows, Spencer Hubbard and Stanley Borden as well, but
and Neil, yeah,
and Neil Begovich, yeah, but and obviously the coaching staff, but Caleb Foster, Tyrese Proctor, only guys he really knows, and Caleb Foster, he didn't even play against Caleb Foster because he was injured pretty much all of last season. But the crazy thing is, so Tyrese Proctor is the only guy he's probably really played against in the past. That's who's going to be his matchup. Like, Reese is now playing shooting guard, not point guard for Duke anymore. And Jaden Schutt is playing shooting guard for Virginia Tech. They're going to be matched up with each other on both ends of the floor. It'd be a very interesting, situation there for those 2 guys who definitely know each other very, very well.
Yeah, and I also thought about putting a little Sion James at him, because again, when we face a team that has a shooter that can get hot, we sometimes put Sion James on there just given that little extra physical defensive look. And I could imagine, I mean, not full stretches. I think you're right in that Proctor will get the bulk of the time against Schutt, but don't be surprised you see Sion James lock up on him for a few possessions, just again to give him a different look on defense. The one thing about them, Jason, you mentioned, they're very inefficient. And so we have to keep them inefficient on offense and defense we'll talk about. But I think offensively, the one thing that gets teams and keeps teams in games and if they get hot. And in Cameron, we've seen teams get hot and it's more difficult for us to put them away and put them away early. I think the idea here is to make it where they make bad decisions with the basketball. They're very good at doing that. So let's not get them out of their rhythm here. Let's keep them doing what they do best, which is turning the ball over in weird, quirky ways. So that's a lot of pressure. That's forcing them to make bad decisions with the basketball. That's shot clock violations, things like that, like making it where this tempo that's going to grind to a halt. We're talking, 60 to 63 possessions here. Make sure every possession is inefficient as possible for them and as efficient as possible for us. I think that's the key here. And Jason, I think the one thing that we always talk about this time of year that is prevalent in every Duke game that comes after a long break, and that's our old enemy, rust. Rust will be present in this game. Let's just make sure that it's not present for too long. We've obviously been prone to bad starts, save for the last couple of games. My hope is that we don't go back to the sluggish starts that we had early in the season as an account of the rust that we've had coming back from Christmas break. So the key to that is the defensive focus that we've usually had pretty early. Hopefully that'll ease us out of the rust on the offensive side of the floor.
Yeah, and it's worth noting Virginia Tech will also be battling the rust demon. They haven't played since the 21st as well. So it's been a little while for them, a 10-day break for them. And I'm sure that they, just like the Duke players did, went back, spent Christmas with their families back home, and then came back to campus on like the 26th or so, the same way Duke did.
Yeah, and so again, that part, great. And it's great for them to get the time at home and the recharge, but it's always been difficult for Duke teams to come back from that and get back into that, okay, we're in this, grind because it is the ACC season now, save for the one game in February against Illinois. We are in the meat of the ACC schedule now. So it's going to be games every, 2 to 3 games every week from here on out. So that grind becomes quick. And so hopefully the rust is not present for a large stretch of this game because the longer it presents itself, the more opportunity there is for Virginia Tech to break through. Jason, anything else on Virginia Tech before we move on?
No, the only little thing, we've mentioned this a lot, but I just want to stress it one more time. It's a little bit unfair. If Duke wants to be a number 1 seed, we can't lose these games to these bad ACC teams. Even though Virginia Tech, we spent this whole podcast so far sort of talking about how this team is just not of the caliber that we would expect from an ACC club. And to some extent, I don't want to say that doesn't matter, but to some extent, anytime you're playing a conference rival, a team that you play every year once or twice, that there's a little bit of, toss out what you've seen in the past. Not quite the way there is against a UNC where the emotions really run high, but Virginia Tech is probably going to play. I'm fully prepared for Virginia Tech and Boston College and the other ACC teams that are bad to play better against Duke than they would in most of their other games because emotionally it's the biggest game on their calendar. And in a season where they have struggled, where they have, really not comported themselves very well, this is their chance to make up for all of it. You kind of mentioned that. And Duke just needs to bring that consistent defensive energy and not let these teams get their confidence, not let these teams get a lead, because you don't want to be fighting from behind against a bad team that is suddenly gaining confidence. And frankly, you want to see Duke winning these games by about 20 points or so, because that's how much better than most of the ACC we are. And you don't want the league to feel like, oh, we can make our bones by beating Duke. We've just got to avoid that if we're going to get the high seed that I think everyone feels like we deserve.
Ken Pom picks us to win 78-54, so he's right in line with that rationale thinking of, if you want this to be a victory that, again, not just on our side, but, kind of pushes the ACC down, but also on our side saying, hey, we're beating the teams that we're supposed to. You got to do it convincingly. That means hot starts. The one place I want us to have a hot start, Jason, that we haven't yet all season, I want us to have a hot start entering the ACC, right? Like go through these first few games and really get our groove going so that it shows the rest of the nation that, hey, just because we're in the middle of the season in this ACC season where it's going to be a grind, no matter how terrible these teams we say they may be, half of these teams are going to win more games than not in the conference. That's just how it works. There's going to be 6, 7 teams that are going to have a positive record in the ACC. We obviously want to be one of them, but we also want to make sure that it's very clear that we are the class of this conference. We will leave it there, Jason. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, we get to the foosball. We're going down to Jacksonville in search of some Gators, but some Rebels are in the way. We'll talk about it after this.
The wrongs we must right. The fights we must win. The future we must secure together for our nation. This is what's in front of us. This determines what's next for all of us. We are Marines. We were made for this.
This episode is brought to you by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. Catch every moment of your team's playoff push with NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. You'll get amazing features like multi-view, and right now, it's only $49 for the rest of the NFL regular season. So give yourself the ultimate gift this holiday season. Get NFL Sunday Ticket for $49. Sign up now at youtube.com/Sunday Ticket. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
This is an ad from BetterHelp. This holiday season, do something for a special person in your life. You. Give yourself the gift of better mental health. BetterHelp Online Therapy connects you with a qualified therapist via phone, video, or live chat. It's convenient and affordable and can be done from the comfort of your own home. Having someone to talk to is truly a gift, especially during the holidays. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
All right, we are back, and as the calendar flips to 2025, we obviously will not be present until after the new year to recap the Virginia Tech game. But also, we wanted to take this time to preview the big football game that is going to be happening on Thursday night in Jacksonville. It is the 2025 Gator Bowl. It is the Duke Blue Devils versus the Ole Miss Rebels. Jason, we're going to talk a little bit about this game because it's a fascinating game. But as we've seen so far in bowl season, for a lot of these games, we just don't know who's going to show up. And so I think I have an idea of who is going to show up in some of these games, and I know you have some notes in them as well. But let's first start with what Ole Miss has done to this point. Ole Miss has simply been, no doubt, one of the best teams in the country all year long. They are 9-3, 5-3 in the SEC. They have wins over Furman, Middle Tennessee. They pummeled Wake Forest early in the year. I think we remember that game. It was an absolute blowout, 40-6.
Yeah, and by the way, that game was a big deal because after it happened, Wake Forest said, "We don't want to play you anymore.
We don't want to play Momo."
Yeah, they had a contract to play again next year. They said, "No, we're breaking the contract," and that was a big problem for Ole Miss because the SEC requires all SEC teams to play at least one non-conference game against a power conference opponent. And Ole Miss was like, "Yo, Wake Forest, if you're gone, we're going to be in violation of our SEC mandate." They were pretty pissed off at Wake Forest for that. Yeah,
it said deal with it. I mean, if you get bumped 40-6, I don't blame you. We did that with Louisville years back and won a court case over it. So I'm okay with it. They also beat Georgia Southern, but then once we got to conference season, they did have some pretty good wins. South Carolina, they beat Oklahoma, they beat Arkansas, and the biggest one, they beat Mississippi State, of course, in the Egg Bowl. But the biggest one is they beat Georgia, and Georgia, as we know, is a very, very good team. You're a very good team. Their losses are to Kentucky, Florida, and LSU, who they lost to in overtime. Jason, Ole Miss is 17.
I was going to say, it's that Florida loss. The Florida loss is the one that really haunts them.
Really bumped them out of the playoff, yeah. They are 17-point favorites in this game. But, of course, Duke has a little bit of history, too. They have a 5-game bowl winning streak that dates back to the Pinstripe Bowl in 2015. It's tied for second longest in college football. But this is easily the biggest bowl that they've had and the biggest opponent they've had since we faced Johnny Manziel and Texas A&M back in the 2013 Chick-fil-A Bowl. Now, let's get to some of the players that we will not see and who we will see in this game. So, Jason, I know you have some, and I will chime in with anything that you left out.
Yeah. In terms of who we will see, the one that matters is Jackson Dart. He is their quarterback. Yeah. He recently declared for the NFL draft. and he's projected, I think, as like second, third, fourth rounder.
Second or third, yeah.
Yeah, he's not like the best quarterback in the draft by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a pretty good one. And you can imagine an NFL team saying, this is a guy that we're going to park on our bench for a couple of years and then develop into a starter, or this is a guy who can be a high-end backup quarterback. Bottom line is he's going to be playing on Sundays. And the thing that sucks for Duke is a lot of guys who declare for the draft say, I'm not going to play in the bowl game. Jackson Dart said the opposite. Jackson Dart said, I want one last go round with my boys. I want to go out in a blaze of glory, and my blaze of glory will be the Gator Bowl against the Duke Blue Devils. He is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. 25 touchdowns in the season, 3,875 passing yards, a completion percentage of 68.6%. Oh my God, Donald, I am not looking forward to playing against this guy. He's not someone you can trap in the pocket. He's got decent mobility. He really snaps his throws off quickly. He's got a very quick release, good NFL kind of size, 6'3". They average, Ole Miss does, they average 343 passing yards per game. That's a big old number, Donald. That is now Duke's pass defense. Duke is really good. We pressure the quarterback. We've got Chandler Rivers and a flock of really good defensive backfield guys, but it's going to be a load trying to contain Jackson Dart and this Ole Miss team. It's worth noting, by the way, that Ole Miss is not a great rushing team. We cannot let them do well on the ground to open up the passing game. That would be a disaster for Duke. If Ole Miss is able to get yards on the ground, then Duke's going to be in real trouble in this contest.
And yeah, I know you're going to get to the running back who was my boy for a couple of years, but also Jackson Dart is the second leading rusher on the team. He rushed for 425 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, like you mentioned, when he's not throwing for 10,000 yards in his career at Ole Miss, he has been hitting the ground, and it's hard to contain him in the pocket. He was sacked 25 times, but that was a lot of them were times where he tried to tuck and run, and they got him behind the line of scrimmage, so they counted it as a sack. So he's very hard to bring down inside the pocket because he is so able to get out and find open space and, most importantly, time to get his throws off and get him downfield very, very quickly.
Yeah, so the guy they rely on the ground, other than Jackson Dart, rushing with the ball, is Henry Parrish Jr. Parrish only rushed for 678 yards in the season, but he didn't have a lot of carries. This Ole Miss team, for the most part, wants to throw the ball. When they go to Parrish, though, he averages more than 5 yards per carry. So, and as a team, they average 4.6 yards per carry. Like their backup, Ulysses Bentley, who's the backup running back, he's another guy who averages more than 5 yards. Like everybody on this team is ripping off like 5 yards per carry, and yet they mostly throw the ball. They are just a super, super potent offensive team. It is worth noting, Donald, I was trying to track a little bit of who, I know you've done more on this, and I should really let you take the lead on who's in the portal, who's not, who's playing, who's not. It's worth noting that they did lose. Ole Miss has lost a few guys on their offensive line, including, I think, both their first and second string right tackles. Mm-hmm. And I believe both those guys are opting not to play in this game. They've lost a couple safeties as well. But not a ton of guys, at least that I could find, especially not a ton of starters, have opted out of this game and are choosing not to play. They do have one key injury that I want to mention, which is wide receiver Trey Harris, who's almost certainly their best wide receiver. He had 60 receptions, over 1,000 yards receiving on the year, and 7 touchdowns. He's the guy they go to more than anyone else in the vertical passing game. He was hurt in like their last regular season game, and it's unclear whether he's going to play in the bowl game or not. It would be a significant loss to Ole Miss if they're not able to play Trey Harris, who's a senior and a really experienced guy, and probably sort of like the rest of the team wants to have that sort of final big moment. And then I did want to mention very quickly Lane Kiffin, their head coach, who is by all accounts an offensive genius. He's a guy who's outspoken. He's a guy who's controversial. You always know what Lane Kiffin is thinking because Lane Kiffin will tell you what he is thinking.
Mhm.
But he's also a really, really good coach, and he is mad. I mean, like really mad that they did not make the college football playoff. He feels like he had a team that was one of the 12 best teams in college football this year, and he was very frustrated at the process and frustrated that, playing that tough SEC schedule, that when they picked up their third loss, that they were essentially knocked out of the playoff. I I I feel like these kind of things can go one of two different ways. One is a team that feels like they were, that the bowl game is beneath them and that they don't, their preparation, their focus isn't what it should be because they are so consumed with we should have been in the playoff. I feel like the other way it can go is a team can be mad and be like,
Right.
we're gonna pound this team that we're playing in this meaningless bowl game to show everyone we belonged in the playoff. Lane Kiffin's a pretty good motivator. I have a feeling which way he's going to be pushing his team. And I think it's going to be toward the let's show everybody that we crushed Duke, one of the better defensive teams out there, and that we really belonged in the playoff. I think that's probably the attitude they're going to have. And that scares me. Scares me a lot.
Well, we will learn that in the first like 5 minutes of the game because Ole Miss is a team that if they're motivated, you will see very quickly what they're trying to do. You mentioned a couple of guys. I want to go through some of the guys that are out of this game. Linebacker Chris Paul Jr., who is not related to the basketball Chris Paul or his twin brother Cliff. He is entering the draft. He is their leading tackler. I think he was an All-American. Very, very good player who also will be playing on Sundays. He is not going to be playing this game. You mentioned the right tackle, Micah Pettis, the starter. He actually was dismissed from the team. So he entered the portal because Lane Kiffin, for reasons that are unknown, said you're not coming back. And so he entered the portal, and then his backup also entered the portal as well. You mentioned the safeties, Lewis Moore, Key Lawrence. Jaden Kennedy, who's their backup nickel, but played a lot. He had 11 passes defensed. He was second on the team. He is out in the portal. But there's a lot of most of every other of their major contributors are playing in this game. You mentioned Jackson Dart, Jordan Watkins, Walter Nolan on defense, Jared Ivey on defense, tight end Caden Prescorn. They're all these guys are big, big guys for them. I want to mention something else that a guy who did not play this year but will play in the bowl game is running back Logan Diggs. He's a transfer from LSU. He actually was going to be the starter this year, so he's kind of like a Jacquez Moore, except we saw a little bit of Jacquez Moore before he got hurt. Logan Diggs will get some carries in this game, so alongside of Henry Parrish, who, as I mentioned, he started at Ole Miss. He went to the U for 2 seasons and then came back to finish his COVID year back at Ole Miss. So and he has he led Miami in rushing when he was there 2 years. He led Ole Miss in rushing this year. Like you said, not a lot of yards, but also not a lot of carries. He gets downfield. He gets downfield very, very quickly. On defense, Jason, I think the one thing that we need to talk about on defense is that this team leads the nation in sacks.
Yeah, their line is like big time.
Their line is incredible. It's not even just the line; they're linebackers. Suntaran Perkins had 10.5 sacks this year. He's a linebacker. Also had 58 tackles. Princely Umanmielen, who's a transfer from Florida. He literally came this year to kind of like boost his stock for the NFL draft. Yeah, he did that. He also had 10.5 sacks. Walter Nolan, I mentioned him, who's playing in this game after entering the portal. He's entering the portal, but also might be declaring for the NFL draft. He's deciding one way or the other. He had 6.5 sacks this year. They have a lot of guys who have multiple sacks. They have a lot of guys who will get to the football. This is the biggest deal for Duke because, as we know, Malik Murphy is not playing in this game. He was a guy who liked to stay in the pocket no matter what. Our offensive line did a fairly good job this year at keeping his jersey clean. Enter Henry Beelan, the fourth, who was going to be playing in this game, a little bit more mobile, right? We've seen him play in years past.
A lot more mobile, yeah.
Well, a lot more mobile than Malik Murphy, which is a low bar, and I'm not saying that disparagingly. Just different styles. But yes, he can get out of the pocket. He can run downfield. We saw him in run packages this year when he entered the game. But the offensive line has to adapt to that. And hopefully over the last 3 weeks, they figured out how to once again kind of adapt to a more mobile quarterback in Henry Beelan who can get outside and run. But his idea is he needs to be able to throw the ball downfield and make big plays, because I tell you who's going to make big plays. It's Jackson Dart in the offense.
Yeah.
They're going to make some incredibly big plays. We need to limit that. The one thing, Jason, that we will have, we mentioned on the last pod that Star Thomas has entered the portal. Opted out of the bowl game. Jacquez Moore will be playing. Peyton Jones will be playing again, and even Beeline is going to get out of the pocket and try and get some yards on the ground when he can't get him through the air. But we need to have a run game. The key to this game is if we can establish the run, which it's been very up and down all year. Again, say for some Star Thomas's performances early in the season, we've had a real rough go of it on the running end of the football. That is going to open up options for us to move the ball downfield with our throwing game. But to do that, we have to establish run game, because I tell you what, Henry Parrish may not be a guy who gets the ball that often, but as you mentioned, they get downfield, they get yards quickly, and that adds to the offensive output that Ole Miss does, and it opens the floor, opens the field for them to do stuff like, throw the ball 60 yards downfield, which they will. There are so many guys. I think there's at least 30 plays that Ole Miss has had that have been over 55 yards. Not over 10, not over 20, over 55 yards. So you got to find a way to stop that. To do that, you have to be absolutely key on defense. Our secondary is going to be big, led by Chandler Rivers. But on offense, we need to do the same, because at a certain point, our defense can't be the bend, don't break while our offense sputters on third downs. The offense is going to have to generate offense to try and win this game.
Yeah, time possession. You got to keep the ball out of Jackson Dart's hand.
Yeah, they average like 30 minutes with the ball, and when you average more than a half hour with the ball, you're gonna score points. And for them, that's the idea here: is get them off the field on offense, and then our offense needs to continue to move the ball downfield. We're not we don't need to average 10 yards per play, but we just need to continually move the chains and get points on possessions, because the more possessions we start punting, like Cade Reynolds, we love you. We don't want to see you, right? Like, we don't want to see you on the field, because that means we're giving the ball back to Ole Miss and giving their offense a chance to do some damage.
Yeah. Look, let's be honest, though. We're 17-point underdogs. And it's not like Vegas is not like Vegas is dumb about this. Mm-hmm. There's a really good reason that Ole Miss is considered way, way, way better than Duke. And honestly, I feel like the transfer portal pluses and minuses, well, all minuses at this point, and the NFL draft minuses for Ole Miss, that they haven't been hit as hard as some teams get hit. The fact that Jackson Dart has said, "I want to play one last game," is a really big deal for this Ole Miss team. It's going to be a very tough one for Duke.
Yeah, and the
ACC by the way sucks in bowl games so far.
Yeah,
so the bar is really high for Duke to even be competitive here.
Yeah, 1-9 in bowl games so far. Shout out Syracuse. They're the only win. They beat Washington State in the Holiday Bowl. SMU and Clemson both lost an open round of playoff. We're not going to discuss that. But Jason, I will say this: there's the fact that we are 17-point underdogs. That all of Ole Miss, or most of Ole Miss's big dogs are in this game. It allows us to kind of just go out and play, right? Maybe with a little bit of chip on our shoulder, because that's how Manny Diaz wants to coach. He wants our players to kind of act like, oh, they're going to disrespect us by being 17-point underdogs. Just play your game, have fun with it, take some risks. This is the game that you can take some chances. If we lose to Ole Miss in a bowl game, yeah, it'll be disappointing, but no one's going to be super upset about it, right? Like, it's Ole Miss. We're not supposed to win against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we said when we entered that game last year on Labor Day against Clemson. Just go play. What will happen? Who knows? But at least we'll give it a good effort. And look what happened there. We can do the same thing against Ole Miss. The last thing I'll mention on this game, Jason, is that, interestingly, this game could play a part in the Mekhi Hughes sweepstakes.
I was going to mention this. Yeah, go for it, baby.
He was the two-time first-team All-American athletic running back from Tulane, who just entered the transfer portal late last week. He ran for 1,401 yards and 15 touchdowns, and he also caught 19 balls for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns this season. Monster numbers. And the two teams who are believed to be the main contenders to land him, Duke and Ole Miss. Of course, we got his quarterback that was handing him the ball this year, and we're hoping that'll be key in getting him to Durham. But Ole Miss, after Henry Parrish is gone, Logan Diggs, I believe, is also he might be entering the portal or not being viewed as a major role next year. But Lane Kiffin has made no mistake, made no qualms in the press about saying he needs a starting running back next year, and he's going to go get one from the portal. That is Mekhi Hughes is who he's focusing on. Duke is also doing the same thing. It'll be interesting to see how this game plays into that decision by him, which will probably be in the next week or so.
Yeah, it's worth noting the other schools that are seen as contenders for Mekhi Hughes are Oregon, Auburn, Colorado. I'm excited about the fact that Duke is being mentioned alongside these programs.
Correct.
I mean, you tell me, oh, Ole Miss, Oregon, Auburn, Colorado, and Duke are after a guy, and I'm like, and we have a good chance for him. It is a real statement, a real testament to A, what Manny Diaz is building, and B, the way Duke is clearly really stepping up in the NIL department in terms of building our football program. It is becoming apparent to me that the notion that, oh, Duke is not a team that can compete with the very top teams in the sport. That was the old way of thinking. It feels to me like there are powerful people around the Duke program who've said, no, we're going to compete with the very best. This Duke team, the goal is not going to be, oh, let's see if we can get 9-10 wins. The goal is going to be, we're making the college football playoff. And that going after guys like Mekhi Hughes, like Darian Mensah in the portal, retaining guys like we're going to be retaining. Like it looks like we're bringing back like almost our entire defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that you haven't seen a ton of portal activity from this very, very strong Duke defense, it shows me that Duke is gearing up for something special next year. And maybe, hopefully, it'd be really nice if it starts with a really competitive effort against Ole Miss in the bowl game.
The idea that, we've talked about the transfer portal in so many different ways is the fact that, as you mentioned, Duke over these last 2 years has remained relatively, unscathed in this, right? We're losing a couple of quality guys, but we only have 5 guys in the portal: Malik Murphy, Grayson Loftus, Star Thomas, and then Carter Wyatt and Montrez Smith, who both didn't play this year. So we aren't really, and everyone else that is eligible to play is playing in this game, save for the guys who are injured. So this is a really big deal. Again, they're putting all their effort in this, and I think when we talked about Bill Belichick and how UNC used that as the reason to up their NIL quotient in football, we have just proven, whether you believe the numbers or not for Darian Mensah, that all you really need, you don't need a Bill Belichick. You need money and motivation. That's all you need. And right now, the motivating factor is, hey, 9-3 this year was a good year. And it feels like the weight of the program, and Manny Diaz is saying 9-3 next year will be a disappointment. We are going to go for higher than that. We want to go for ACC championships. We want to go for the playoff and compete for national championships. That's what we can do. And all it takes is just a few turns of the key here at the transfer portal and in recruiting and keeping guys intact in Durham. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hope you are too. For those of you who are going down to Jacksonville, safe travels. Enjoy the game. 7:30 on ESPN Thursday night, prime time. Nothing else is on, so everyone can watch this game. So tune in and watch our Blue Devils take it to the Ole Miss Rebels. We will leave it here on this latest episode of DBR Bites. We will be back in the new year, sometime after the Virginia Tech game, to recap that game and get ready for the basketball that is also going to occur this weekend. But until then, get your headlines in, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Get them to us after the game. Continue sending us questions, and some of them we can address on future shows, and some of them we will put a B in and kind of pinpoint it and note it for after the season, because you guys have sent some very good questions lately that Jason and I would love to discuss in full, but just don't have the time right now too. We're going to save some of those questions and those topics for the off season. So continue to send those to us. Until then, for Jason Evans, I am Donald Wine. Happy New Year, everybody. Joyous Kwanzaa to everybody celebrating. Hanukkah is still going on. Happy Hanukkah to you, Jason and Sam out there, and everybody who is celebrating Hanukkah at this time. We will be back very, very soon. Enjoy, be safe, and let's go Duke. It is now time for the Duke Bandits to play us out and take us into 2025.